Okay. Hey, everybody, and welcome to my writing playground. This is episode number 7 of Diverse Sci-Fi and Fantasy Stories podcast. I'm your host, author Alicia McCullough. Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is all about me honoring my son's legacy by sharing my diverse science fiction and fantasy stories with the world. Today, I have the wonderful opportunity to share the works of another author who also writes diverse science fiction and fantasy. Let me tell you about Penelope. As an author and 3D illustrator, Penelope Flynn enjoys creating mixed genre adult targeted speculative fiction featuring elements of horror, suspense, science fiction, romantica, and fantasy. She has works in the Dark Universe anthologies, Steampunk Anthology, Genesis, an anthology of Black science fiction book 2, Serogenous 2, Blurred Erotica 1, and the novel The Chronicles of Renfields regarding Kosu. Unflamed, her Renfields-based short story, is one of the 29 stories featured in Slay Stories of the Vampire Noir anthology, and the second of the Chronicle of Renfields. The first book of Ramona is scheduled for release October 30th, 2020. Penelope Flynn is cover artist for Chronicles of Renfields, cover and an interior artist for the Flashbang anthology, cover artist for Carol McDonald's novelette, The Charcoal Bride, and Stone May's Bloomverse short, Ava Dianas and Her Minion of Evil. Her works can be found at penelopeflynn.com and renfields.us. Okay, hey, welcome Penelope. I'm excited to see you.
I'm excited to be here.
First, I want to reiterate that Penelope is one of the Slay Vampire Noir anthology authors. So you want to tell us a little bit about Unflamed and what it's all about?
Well, Unflamed is actually a story I started, a while back, a long time ago. It is actually the first origin story, like second origin story for Renfields. And Renfields is, my, at the moment, magnum opus. Renfields is a series, and it is regarding vampires, but not just vampires, all different shapeshifters, but Renfields themselves, who are a hybrid. They are vampires and they are human beings. In our nomenclature, the Renfield universe, this place that we live is called the vampires that we speak of are actually descendants of or the travelers who come from another dimension, another galaxy, another actual universe. So these people, these Renfields, all these millennia have been takers of these revenants who, for reasons you'll find in the books, have issues with being able to interact in this world the way that it is. So the Renfields are their hybrid of themselves and the Paradoxans who kind of do their will. This all came about from, of course, my reading of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the character Renfield, who was insane in Dr. Seward's facility, and he was the acolyte of Dracula. But I thought, when I read this, many years after I read it, but what if he wasn't the only one? And what if he was just crazy and the rest of them are not?
Right.
And that's where the story came from, the concept of Renfields, as these people who are created by the Revenants, who are the vampires, in order to serve them, who are, of course, bound by blood. They have, the same bloodlines, but how one determines that they are the masters and the others the servants, even though the servants are smart, sharp, and also very wealthy as time goes by. So this is that story, and Unflamed tells the story of how the prefect of the Renfield organization, their imperial head, how she first meets the character that we see in Bram Stoker's Dracula, that Renfield.
Oh, wow. That sounds exciting. I always think of when I know this is like totally corny, but I remember people used to say Renfield, right? Because
Yeah,
Renfield was nuts, right?
yeah, that's precisely the issue with
Mhm,
this man who's supposed to be, one of their own. And we think, oh, Renfield, he's nuts. He's like,
mhm,
yeah, he was. And it's like, as a person, like, because all this is, the way I kind of work through being an African American in the United States. That's
mm,
kind of what Renfield is for me. We have that hybrid of race and culture
mm,
that is, you know, in my mind, that's better than the sum of its parts. But
mhm,
yet, we still find ourselves in these, suppressed and oppressed, situations regardless.
mm.
So this is my homage to, my people, and
Right,
their journey as a hybrid trying to navigate this world.
right. Okay. So let's talk about the scene that you're going to share today from the Renfields. So where is this scene from in that series?
This is the first scene from the first book of Ramona, which is
Okay.
the novel that is being released on October 30th, general
Mm,
release on October 30th. The main character of Renfield, even though we have a book already out called Regarding Koyescu is basically the story of an individual who is a revenant, who is an ally. And we deal with issues of how our allies see the world and how they see us.
mm,
Then we do it, the first book, Ramona, where Ramona is actually the main character of Renfield.
mm,
She is the daughter of the imperial head. She is the prefect's eldest daughter. And
mhm,
she is, the heir apparent, getting ready to make that move into that position of power, where she not only takes over the traditional role as head, but also head of the corporation. So she's the first individual ever to be prepared for that role, to head of the corporation and head of the traditional organization of Renfield.
mm,
So she's very smart, savvy, very disciplined, but of course, because of who she is, the issues of nepotism come up, all the time, and bias. Well, does
mm.
she really deserve the position she's moving into? So she does have, a lot of those imposter syndrome,
Syndrome. Mm-hmm.
even though she has worked hard for everything she has.
Mm,
And it's a story about, hard work, about her meeting someone. Her whole life's kind of laid out exactly how it's supposed to be. Then meeting a man, who is from Abijah. So he is like a foreigner. He's from the other universe. He comes in, but he needs that role too. He wants that job too. There's a job, an intermediate position. She is, as you'll know, we'll find from this segment, the deputy director of investigations and enforcement. The
mm,
director will soon be leaving, so that position will become open. We have a young
mhm,
man who comes from Abijah, who has basically burned every bridge he has ever crossed in his entire life, with his
mhm,
family, with his colleagues, etc., because he's brash, he's smart, beautiful man, but
mhm,
he doesn't know how to work well with others.
mm,
And through a horrible situation as far as Ramona's concerned, somehow he gets hired onto her team.
mhm,
So we have our character who's very disciplined, having to deal with a guy who has not dealt with command structure, even though he knows how, but has not
mm,
dealt with it, in recent years. And so they clash because she is the person who deserves this, but he's the
mhm.
person who really wants this. And it's one of the first times I've written two characters who are diametrically opposed in that manner. And I
Mm.
love them both, but I know one of them has to lose and one of them has to win.
Right. Okay. That I think you set up some good conflict, right? All
And it's
right. So you
great.
want to you want to tell us why you're the person to write this story or the series? Because it sounds like you've been working at Redfield for a while.
For a long time, because it's something that you have to kind of work through. And the reason why I think I am is because I'm like, I am a horror fan. I am a fantasy fan.
Mm,
I watched all the films. Me and my sisters were big, Hammer and and every type of horror that you can imagine from childhood. We loved horror. Then I used to read, like people like Frank Yerby, when he tells a story, a historical uh, fiction. I love the historical fiction. I love the fact that in his works, they dealt with issues of sexuality. Because
Mm.
one of the things I find with African Americans especially is that we've been made for so long to be ashamed of talking about issues of sexuality
Yeah.
and sex, not sexuality, sex. Let's say it straight out. It's just
Mm.
sex. That we are either eroticized or exoticized, and don't get to tell the story of ourselves and what we find to be pleasurable and how we are attracted to someone. So I put that in my books, and I know that's kind of an issue sometimes. Oh my gosh, sex. But I think as a people, that's one of the things that we have to get over,
Right.
because we have been defined by other people's view of our sexuality for so long.
Over
That
sexualized sometimes.
over-sexualized, and then you become eunuchs in the other sense, that either somebody's mammy or some prostitute, but never hey, I'm just a regular woman and this is what I like.
Right.
It's a regular man and this is what I like.
Mm.
And doing those things are natural things, but we're taught for ourselves to be ashamed, and that's what I really like to away from. It's one of those things. I'm a Catholic girl, so grew up in the Catholic Church, and of course, you have all these issues with the Catholic Church not being able to deal with issues of sex and sexuality. And so I find, I think I'm uniquely situated as a Catholic person, as a woman, as a Black woman, to talk about these things, and also the concept of our as nature as African American people, in that we, for so long, have not really been able to define ourselves. And I think it's important to understand that we, I know I love the sword and soul genre, and I think it's really great. But steampunk is the thing that got me, because that talked about us here, an alternate history that emerges from this African American experience.
Right.
And that's where I'm at. Even with Renfields, my main character Ramona is African American, even though her mother may not be, and father is. When we say African American, we're talking about her father came over when he was young with the Spanish to St. Augustine, the first city that existed in the United States before it was
Right.
the United States. So these people have deep roots here, and I want to always look at that for our people to understand we are rooted here in the United States, that we are not foreign in that sense. The Ellis Islanders don't get to tell me anything. I was
This is
here
true.
before.
Most African Americans have been here for
Yeah,
6 or 7 generations.
right. So I look at Ellis Islanders don't get to say anything to me. And that's what this is about, us claiming, our heritage through science fiction, fantasy, horror, and to acknowledge, that these people come here and try to leapfrog over us and call us other. And it's kind of like, well, but you weren't here before. So how do you grandfather yourself into those people who did bad to us, and all of a sudden you're aligning yourself with them, and basically still, here we are. And in Renfields, I covered that in some of the segments about when people are changed and they become, the sires and the dames of these vampires, our revenants. It's like, so I still remain a Renfield. I've been here longer, been blood of your blood for all this time, and here comes somebody like yesterday, and all of a sudden, they're coddled into the fold, and still we're referred to as other. So
Right.
yeah, so working this is really
These
working
issues,
all
yeah.
these, yeah.
So
So
I think you kind of alluded a little bit about your reasons or the inspiration behind the series. Did you want to talk a little bit about that
sure,
more?
sure. And again, all these thoughts rolling around in my mind. But then you have Renfield, that Renfield, who is this crazy man. And then the thought that, okay, what if he isn't the only one? So this is how it starts. I said, well, okay, well, how do we build that? And this even comes from further back. One of my very best friends who I lost a few years ago used to read Gothic romance all the time. She loved Gothic romance. And she, oh, you got to read this. It's really good. It's wonderful. So I'm reading it. And I'm like, this is nice. Where are the Black people at? It's like, and, and when there were Black people, they were servants or they were the noble savage, something of that ilk, always, as Spike Lee called it, the magical Negro, promoting the interest of the lead character. Or even if the Black person was a lead character, they were always a slave, always, in a lowered position, basically the caste system that we're in. And I thought, well, everybody else's stuff that they're writing during this period is make-believe. So why is their make-believe any more better than our make-believe? I said, how do I create a society of people, Black people, brown people? In fact, Renfield's all very diverse. As far as ethnicities, they're all very diverse. But you'll see in the books when you read, they see each other as like a Black person who's a Renfield sees another Black person, and an Anglo person is Renfield sees another Anglo person. They say they, as Renfield, are alike. They are not like those people. That we are alike, they are not like us. Even though they think they're like us, that we look alike, that I'm a Black person, that's a white person, they don't get it. They're not like us. We are like us. So that's what the Renfield thing is. Basically, all Renfields are Black people. Their theory of them is that they're all the experience of African Americans who have various and sundry backgrounds. So this thing, I decided that in order to have us have the life that I wanted us to have in the past, and what I write, as far as Renfield's, what I call it is Afro-retroism, that I'm able to do what's in the past. We can't go to the future until we reclaim ourselves in the past. So these Renfields in the past are powerful. They are rich. They have their own culture, and it runs parallel to the historical line that's ongoing in normal history. So it is like an alternate history, but like a parallel history, so that, yeah, we get to be rich. Yeah, it's not just like, oh, we're a rich secret society. Everybody knows about them. Everyone knows who they are in this parallel universe I've created, which I like to call life and the paradox. And the paradox comes from the point that those who are coming from Abijah, the home world, this other universe that they're from, everything's in shades of gray. When they come here to this place, everything is black and white. Everything is extremes, harsh sunlight, dark of night. They are eternally twilight where they are. Deserts, great huge deserts, great hydro deserts, what they call oceans, the hydro deserts. All these things are these terrible extremes, and their nature cannot handle it, which is why they become feral, because they break. It's like a complete break between their civil side and their feral side, and they can't handle the sunlight. They have to be out at night, but the night makes them to nocturnal animals. So it's like this crazy thing that happens to them. It's why they needed other people to help them navigate this world. Which is why exist.
So you kind of spoke a little bit about some of the themes that you're working on. Is there one theme that is personal to you, or that you feel exemplifies your personal experiences, or that fascinates you?
Yes, and one of the issues that in Renfield, there is not a matriarchy, it is a meritocracy. But a lot of women, most women, are in positions of power. Because her mother, the main character, her mother is the prefect. She's the head honcho. and everything about her is strategy. You know, she's like, if you see somebody and they're really good and they're like 10 steps ahead of you, her mother's 100 steps ahead of you. She's figured out every possible outcome of every possible action, and has to do that because these are things that are for the benefit of their people, because they are always of the belief that from day to day, any of these people could change their mind. You could be under attack from the paradoxans, who are the regular people who fear you because of your power, and then the revenants, who are your other half because of your access that they don't have and that they have to rely on you. So you're stuck in the middle dealing with these people, and the concept of having to kind of circle the wagons and take care of your own. I guess that's the thing that I think comes out the most, that I feel most. And it's interesting, when I met William Hayashi years ago, and during discovery and conception, and it's kind of like we're all just flowing on that same wavelength of like, we have got to learn to take care of our own. We have got to take care of our own, because if from day to day, week to week, when anyone decides that they don't like you, or they're afraid of you, then you're constantly, just look at us now, look around now. I think a Black man's back must be the most horrible weapon in the world, because everybody keeps shooting them in them.
Right.
It's like your horrible, frightening back. That's,
Yes.
I mean, and we look at it, and we are. I think I've learned so much, during this period. I mean, I'm mortified by the fear, the hatred. It's crazy, but that concept of, kind of to circle the wagons, because if we don't, we're just kind of out there, unprotected, and expecting our protection to come from either one or the other side of our heritage. And
It really needs to come from within.
Exactly.
I hear you. So do you want to give us an idea about, I think you've spoken a lot about the diversity in your stories, but if a reader would be interested in your diverse worlds, how should they give you a shot with your diverse world?
Why would they do that?
Yes.
Well, I think I would hope that the world is such, because I said it is diverse, a lot of people, different backgrounds. There are, Asian people in it, there are Latinx people, there are Anglo people, there are, even within the entire Renfield organization, different religions. They have their own religion, but they also associate with another religion that is like, a religion that people would normally have within the paradox, because they're supposed to be, quote unquote, blending in. So they blend in by what they wear, how they act, how they interact, but they are also known as what they are. And, people see them, and they are, I don't know if like in New York, where they have some of the segments in New York, they have the Hasidic Jews who live in their own place, and they kind of their own thing. That's kind of how Renfields are.
Gotcha.
People know who they are, and they are kind of untouchable where they are. They have, agreements with how they get to interact with this world. So, and it's all very corporate. I mean, everything in Renfields is very, very corporate. It's very business. It's part of like a larger world that we created, which we call Life in the Paradox. The Life of the Paradox has a lot of different stories in it that Renfields, you see no Renfields in that story, but you're watching television, you're seeing the Renfield what's called going on the ticker tape saying, where the Renfield stock is up or down that day, or so, but that's, but they're just part of that universe of the Life of the Paradox.
Gotcha. Okay, so you're saying that Ramona, she's your main character, right?
Yes.
All right. So I think you a little bit alluded to what's at stake for her and what she needs, but did you want to expound upon that a little bit more?
Sure. Ramona is like, um, in my mind, I created her as every Black girl. She's every
Mm.
Black girl that, you grow up, and she's fortunate enough to have a system. Theirs has a system where you have three parents. You have your mother and your father, and either your mother has another, husband, or your father has another wife, or whatever. But they're all. It's called a commitment, and the person in the middle of the commitment who chooses the other two members, that is who her mother was. Her
Mm.
mother chose the other two, and these people are chosen specifically because of the issues with security for raising children.
Mm.
And she is raised by these three individuals. And these three individuals, of course, make her ready for the role that they believe that she's suited for. Now, she's got siblings, and her siblings are very smart, and her siblings are very clever, things of that ilk. But, like her younger sisters, they're all about money. And they don't want responsibility. They just want money. And they're
Mm.
like traveling between the two universes and doing their thing. She has another younger brother who is, more erudite. He's more of an academic. He's not interested in doing this thing. So it's almost with her that she has it's like not just a choice, it's kind of like a burden.
Mm.
And you know how it is when you're growing up and you're that smart kid and
Mhm.
you say, boy, I would really like to be a writer. And
Mm.
your family says, no, you got to be a doctor, or you got to be a
Right,
lawyer,
or an engineer.
or an engineer.
Mhm.
You know it. These are the
Mhm.
things, they tell us, you can't do that. You have to do a profession. And that's basically what Ramona's story is. That, you know, her people have decided for her, her parents have decided for her that you are capable, therefore you must, which is the life that many of us live. You are capable, therefore you must.
Mhm.
And then we find ourselves now, our children, leaving home and having had careers, doing other things, then being able to step out again and do this thing that we'd wanted to do from the very beginning, now realizing the importance of it because
Mhm.
everyone else gets to have their make believe that forms the basis of their character, the basis of their culture.
Mhm.
But we have not. Again, like I say, why is their flying man any more valid than my flying man?
Well.
You know?
Mhm. Mm.
So, and our kids have got to understand that your flying man is just as valid. You
Yeah.
know, your woman who's the super strong is just as valid.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's what this is about. You
Mhm.
know, that thing that, I mean, we can't get away from it. We know it exists.
Mhm. That
There,
sense of agency and ownership and empowerment that comes from seeing yourself in that imaginative world and
exactly,
using your imagination to get there. Mhm.
exactly.
I
And
hear
that's
you.
what I want this for. Now, my first book, regarding Koyescu, certainly skewed more erotic.
Mhm.
Um, the first book of Ramona, of course, it still has, the interaction, the romantica, not as erotic as regarding Koyescu, because I think there eventually will be what I call a purple rose version of the first book of Ramona, but this will be the red rose version, which is the different hierarchies in Renfield is red, gold, black, and purple.
Mm.
Um, the purple is actually lower, but the purple, because everybody understands purple prose, that's going to be, later on, the more erotic versions of the stories that'll be written now. The first book of Ramona will, of course, have the romantic, scenes and, the personal, sexual, interaction between she and the people that she has relationships with. And that's another thing, too, that I think the concept of telling young women or men, or even men, one person, one guy, one girl, whatever, that's it, the end,
Mm.
is something I really need to get away from. It's like,
Mm.
you get out there and you meet different people and you like them or you don't like them. You see what you like or dislike and move on to someone else if this doesn't serve you. Don't feel compelled to stay in a relationship just because this was simply the first relationship.
Mm.
So all those things, I put all the, I guess basically everything. If I could be like everybody's mother, You know, this is what I would try to tell them. And this is what I
Yes.
guess what books are, what I'm trying to tell you, and the things that, when we were brought up, we weren't supposed to be saying, or what we were supposed to say, oh, don't talk about those things. I want those things out there where if you can find it, can't find it at home, at least find it in a book, that it's okay that you don't like this guy anymore. It's okay that you don't like this girl anymore, at least not that way, you know, and you get to move on and they get to move on, and it's just I'm going to take a real short detour and say the first time I watched a K-drama and there was this guy and the leading lady was all into this guy. But then there's a guy who'd been her friend for a long time who was carrying the torch for her. He was smart. He had money. He really cared about her. He, put himself out there, to let her know how he felt. And in that K-drama, what happened? So, well, I'm not interested in you. I like this other guy. I lost my mind. In our Western view, just because he's smart and sweet and good and stuff, and she's supposed to not like who she likes, so I like you now. That's the way we're programmed our men and our women to believe. If I just stalk you long enough, then you have to like me. And I was stunned that it's kind of like, okay, that's nice, but she ain't into you. Shrug, move along. And you know what? That you see all the time in K-dramas. The leading male, the leading female, they are into each other. It doesn't matter whether somebody that we think is better likes them. That's irrelevant. Because guess what? They don't like them. Right. They're not into them that way. And we have not taught our children, we have not been taught appropriately that thing. I watched a film, Betty Davis, what is his name? Not one of the Barrymores, I can't remember which one, that he was this guy and he come to their little gas station at the very last stop before you enter into, that area where there's nothing, going to the desert. But there was this guy in that restaurant who worked there. She worked there. It was her father's restaurant. And the guy who liked her, he was just like all over her like a cheap suit, I mean, for a movie, for that period, I was kind of taken aback. Like kissing on her. She did not want to be kissed by him. And basically, he's working for her father. And I guess they need people out there to work. So she didn't feel, it appeared, as appropriate for her to push him off. And the father said, oh, yeah, well, this is going to be, your boyfriend or, two really, getting in, getting along, blah, blah. But even as the father saw this man like all over his daughter, he didn't say, look, nothing, you don't get to do that.
Right. No boundaries.
There were none. And our young men grow up seeing these things and believe that as appropriate behavior. And we have not told them. We look at that movie, even in that movie, and it was like a Turner Classic Movies. When they described the movie, not once did they say anything about the inappropriate nature of what it was that was done, because they don't even see it. They don't even acknowledge it. They don't recognize that this thing is so horrible and she has nowhere to go. That she's got to stay there and put up with this man pawing on her and saying the line to her, well, I know I feel this way about you, so that means that you feel this way about me.
About me. Wow.
And that was in the film. I know, okay, but I'm going far afield. I apologize. But basically, what it comes down to is that all of us as writers, I think what it is, especially Black writers, Black female writers, at this time, this Renaissance, we're trying to fix the world through our writing.
Yes, ma'am.
We're all trying to fix it. We don't know how far we're going to get, but everything that we know, everything we've been through, everything we've experienced or seen other people experience, we're trying to fix it, So I would say when people, look at our work and say, why should you look at this work? Why should you read my stories? Because just like my sisters here who are involved in this, we're trying to fix it. There may be something in here that you go on in your life, do whatever it is that you do, that will spark something that will help you figure out how to fix it. So that's
Right.
what I would say. You know, we're trying to fix it. So just read it, and maybe you'll find something that'll help you discover that fix, the real
Yes,
deal.
ma'am. Okay, so you ready to read your scene?
Yeah, it's like, hey, where's my scene? I don't know. Say, I tried so hard to get all this stuff put together. Right. So yes, this is my scene.
Mhm.
Comes from, of course, the first book of Ramona. I did not. I first thought about doing my Unflamed, but the Unflamed story is short. So if I did, a significant portion of it, I would be giving away all my story.
Yes.
So I decided instead to go with another issue, and this is from the Chronicles of Renfields, the first book of Ramona, um, by Penelope Flynn, and this is chapter 1, 1928. Ramona clambered 8 stories up the fire escape of a building in the financial district. Less than 3 hours before, she was scheduled to appear at the opening ceremonies of the year's constabulary. It was the equinox, and the waning crescent moon provided scant light into the city's pitch-black side streets. She turned up the collar of her uniform coat against the chill of the early spring breeze, its deep crimson billows blending in with the building's brick exterior, as much as her satin skin blended into the night sky. She hopped onto the roof, then crouched down, minimizing her nearly 6-foot frame, shielding herself from view. She gazed at the opening to the alley, then glanced at her watch, scowling as precious minutes ticked away. She had posted most of her officers close to Wall Street, a place bustling with activity during the day, but it was quiet, nearly soundless late Friday night. The smells, however, remained. They rose all around them, a mixture of pleasant and repugnant. They were used to it. Had been a city dweller for the vast majority of her life, from Paris to London to New York, the places their corporate occupations took them, where their presence was needed most. Her posture stiffened as she focused. Those of her kind had olfactory, audio, tactile, visual acuity, and gustatory perception far beyond that of the natives who lived in the place her people called the Paradox. And that night, they would employ most of those capabilities in completing their assignment. Ramona's sensory mastery was unparalleled, which is why, from 8 floors up and miles away from her current location, she could hear music playing in a club uptown, where there was dancing, food, and physical attraction. The sense of blood from accelerating pulses perfumed the air, even at that distance. Her eyelids fluttered rapturously as she slowly inhaled through her mouth, tasting the sensory essence. Her head swam, and her body flushed, while her sharp, exsanguinating fleams and fangs broke through, threatening to drop into place. Focus in close, she thought, then forced herself to concentrate on assessing only the few blocks around her. Anything else was a distraction. And in New York City, on a Friday night at the height of the jazz age, there were bound to be many, many distractions. Her lieutenant, Eugene, who was stationed several blocks away, called to her through their mind speak, a form of two-way telepathy. Deputy Director, there's nothing on this end. Maybe we've timed it wrong. Maintain positions and keep senses on high alert, she responded. They'll be here. During the past 4 months, 4 different groups of people had simply vanished without a trace around midnight near Wall Street. The incidents had been kept out of the newspapers, but when the families and friends of the missing began making inquiries to the New York Police Department, Renfield International CEO received a personal call from Mayor Jimmy Walker himself, suggesting that the disappearances might be related to the types of security issues Renfield International commonly dealt with, things the mayor referred to as ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties and things that could bump in the night. Pursuant to treaty and contractual agreement with the city, those things fell under the jurisdiction of Renfield's Investigations and Enforcement Division. As a result, they were immediately set to the task of locating and eliminating the source of the problem. Ramona scratched the back of her head and for a moment recoiled, feeling the absence of the nearly 3-foot-long coarse braid that used to run down her back. The hair was cut so short now that it was almost impossible at a distance to appreciate the natural curl and crimp. Then her stomach began to rumble. She hadn't eaten all day. Poor planning, she whispered under her breath, then muttered, 2 hours. She had exactly 2 hours to complete the surveillance, file the paperwork, rush home, wash, change, and head to the opening ceremonies of the constabulary, Renfield International's corporate retreat. The constabulary hosted the corporation's most influential and powerful members. Delegates would be arriving from all over the globe. However, any outsiders who were aware of the festivities were also aware that security teams would be stretched thin. It was therefore no surprise that whenever the 2-week event was staged, there was always an uptick in supernatural-related criminal activity. We've got something, Eugene conveyed, and it's coming your way.
Okay. Thanks for sharing your scene. I appreciate you. So you want to tell me where readers should go to find you and your work?
Well, you can find my work at penelopeflynn.com. If you really get into Renfields, which I hope people will, renfields.us or renfields.net, they both go to the same place. And if you really, really enjoy what I do, you can actually find me at Patreon. You can become a patron at patreon.com/Penelope_Flynn. So I hope people will enjoy it. I hope they'll be able to see all the allegories and the analogs that are built into it, and maybe even see some that I didn't even recognize when I wrote it. But again, what we do when we write these things, that we are looking at our world and we're trying to, I guess, express how we think we can make things better, or at least issue spot as the things that are going on. Maybe someone else can make them better.
Yes, grapple with it. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so I'd also love to hear what readers think about Penelope's stories. Feel free to post a comment on my blog. Either me or Penelope will respond. Okay,
Yes.
everybody. I'm author Alicia McCullough, and I write science fiction and fantasy stories for readers who want diverse protagonists and unique storylines. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to support me or donate to my Cup of Tea Fund, just head on over to my blog on my website, find this post, and click on the donate button at the bottom. And if you're not one of my subscribers and want to join my League of Heroes, go to www.aliciamccullough.com to sign up for my newsletter, get updates, learn about my latest projects, and purchase my diverse sci-fi and fantasy stories. And if you're already one of my subscribers, thank you so much. And please feel free to share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Okay, Penelope, I always end with either some kind of special saying. So I'm going to go for Wakanda Forever today. You want to go with me?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Wakanda Forever.
Wakanda Forever.
And thanks for listening, everybody.